Hello, everyone. Welcome in. We are really excited to bring some very important information surrounding voting eligibility and rights, in particular for people that are system impacted, people that maybe have felony or misdemeanor convictions. Your voice matters, and we want for you to know what you can legally do and how you can engage in civic engagement. So we have an excellent group of experts here tonight from several amazing organizations. I'm really excited. My name is Marcy Marie, and I am with Lioness Justice Impacted Women's Alliance. I am just going to be moderating tonight, and we have technical support by Jennifer Toon, who is also with Lioness Justice Impacted Women's Alliance and Texas After Violence Project. I'd like to give everyone an opportunity to introduce themselves, and I think we'll start with Taylor and then go to Ashley. They're kind of the legal experts in this field. Taylor, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, my name is Taylor Trevino. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm with the Texas Civil Rights Project. I'm our voting rights senior advocacy manager. So I've got some knowledge on all of this stuff, but I'll pass it over to the technical legal expert, Ashley, to introduce herself.
Hi, y'all. I'm Ashley Harris. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a staff attorney at the ACLU of Texas. I work primarily on voting rights, and we do a lot of work at the intersection of voting and the criminal legal system.
Thank you so much, Taylor. Ashley, we have a few other professional experts surrounding voter eligibility, and that is Steve Huerta. Would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Steve Huerta with All of Us in Texas, and I hope to contribute as much as I can to this conversation, very important one. And I'll pass it on to my brother, Robert Lilly.
Peace and blessings. Good evening, everyone. My name is Robert Lilly, but I prefer Brother Rob. And I say that often because all I want to do today is be a brother to another. I'm with the Texas After Violence Project tonight. That's the group that I'm here representing in this space. And I am justice impacted. And I am also, I want to use my pronouns are he and him. I think that about covers my introduction. If there's anything I miss, I'm sure Ms. Marcy is going to inform me.
Thank you, Brother Rob. Tisa Leggett, would you please introduce yourself?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tisa Leggett. I'm the Executive Director of the Justice Reform Foundation and a member of the Texas Clean Slate Coalition. It is a pleasure to be here this evening with all of you to help you understand more about how we can ensure that we have policy to support record expunsion and also automate it. Good to meet all of you.
Thank you so much for that. I would like to remind everyone that we are recording tonight, and we are going to restream this webinar so that it can reach even more people. So if you're uncomfortable with that, those of you that are watching, please feel free to stay off camera. Please feel free to change your name when it's time to ask questions. If you have a question, we're absolutely comfortable with that. Whatever works for you, that's what works for us. So I think that we can jump right in to the meat of this and what we're really trying to get at, which who is eligible to vote. And I'd like to open up this first question to Ashley Harris. And can you tell us about felony voting rights? Who's eligible? People that have felony convictions, who can vote in Texas?
Definitely. And that question for you, is it possible to share my screen? Okay, we're gonna try this. Someone might need to approve, and if not, we can.
I'm working on that now, but Jen might be able to help.
There we go. Okay, 1 second. All right, and I'll let someone let me know if this isn't visible. But this is kind of a visual summary of
It's
when,
not visible, Ashley.
Not
I'm
yet.
sorry.
Mm-mm.
Not yet.
let's see. It's not going through. If not, we can just talk through it.
There it is.
There we go. Much better. So this is kind of a visual summary of when felony convictions or criminal convictions can affect voter eligibility. So under Texas law, folks are may be eligible to vote if they don't have any felony convictions. And that has to be a final felony conviction. So if someone just has a misdemeanor conviction, that's not going to affect their eligibility. If someone has been charged with a felony, but they haven't been convicted, and that includes if they're detained in jail pre-trial, that's not going to affect eligibility. Things that also aren't final felonies are things that are still on appeal. So finally, felony convictions, even if there's a conviction, but then it's on appeal, that's not considered something that makes someone ineligible. Deferred adjudication for a charge is also not going to make someone ineligible. So the rule to remember is that before a final felony conviction, it's not going to affect eligibility. But someone does become ineligible to vote, so they can't vote when they have a felony conviction and are serving a sentence for that felony. But after a sentence for a felony conviction is fully discharged, including any terms of incarceration, parole, probation, or supervision, then they're eligible to vote again. And so this is a really confusing rule because it's not written clearly. But looking at this slide, someone, if after they fully discharge their sentence, including all of those things that are listed in the statute, they can become eligible to vote again, or if someone is pardoned. And so once someone is eligible to vote after a felony conviction, after their sentence has been fully discharged, they have to re-register in order to utilize that eligibility. And so going through the steps of eligibility, the first thing to remember is to check felony status. And the rule to remember is that all felony convictions and their sentences have to be fully discharged. Then folks also have to be United States citizens, a resident of the state and county where they're trying to vote. So you need to register in the county where you live, and you need to be at least 18 years old. And so I'll just leave that up there. But that is the rule when it comes to felony convictions. I think things that a lot of times people aren't sure about is on that first piece before the final felony conviction, knowing that misdemeanors don't affect eligibility, but also that it has to be a final conviction. So a lot of people in jail don't realize that they can vote if they're only in jail pre-trial and there hasn't been any conviction for a felony. And then afterwards, a lot of people don't know that you can become eligible again even after a felony conviction if the sentence is fully discharged. Something else to make sure about is that to be eligible, you have to finish the sentence for all felony convictions. So you want to make sure there's not an older felony conviction or something like that where this sentence hasn't been fully finished. So they all need to be done. And let's see if I can stop sharing. There we go.
Thank you so much for those details and for the visual. I think that helps so much. I just want to, for those of us who might not know what exhausting your sentence means, what exactly does finishing your sentence mean in Texas?
Yeah, so the statute says it kind of explains it through example. So to be eligible after a felony conviction, you have to have fully discharged a sentence for that felony conviction. And that includes, it says it includes four things: incarceration, probation, parole, and any terms of supervision. And the other thing is, of course, being pardoned. So folks kind of need to evaluate their own situation to determine whether their sentence has been fully discharged. And if there is uncertainty, folks can either consult with their criminal defense lawyer or call their elections office as well to ask what they consider the parameters of those things to be.
Thank you for that. We sometimes hear cases of people that know that they are still on parole and think that they can vote, and they go through the registration process and they get that approval for registration. So what is your recommendation to them?
Yeah, so we recommend that everyone, before registering to vote, evaluate their eligibility and make sure that they are eligible to register. If someone is to make a mistake on a registration form and not understand kind of what those requirements for eligibility are, they can cancel their registration by requesting that their elections office cancel that registration without needing to specify a reason or explain, but just cancel their registration so that they can then be in compliance.
Thank you so much for that, Ashley. I appreciate that very much. Taylor, I'm wondering if you have run into any issues or seen any issues regarding voter eligibility, or people registering and not knowing, or
Yeah, not a ton. I think it's a lot of what Ashley mentioned in terms of like people maybe not being sure if they're, still on paper, for whatever reason. Um, One thing I actually did want to highlight or clarify, maybe that Ashley you could speak to, is whenever I've gone and done voter registration here at the Travis County Jail, one of the coordinators tells people that fines are not included in that. If they're done with, parole, probation, and all that, but still owe fines, that it does not count to their sentence. Ashley, is that correct to your knowledge?
Yeah, I actually don't have an answer on that, Taylor.
Okay, apologies. We can definitely follow up on that for specifics, but at least in the general guidance that I've heard, that might be helpful for people to know. But again, like Ashley said, definitely want to make sure you clarify your own situation as much as possible before registering and then attempting to vote.
Thank you, Taylor. I want to ask you one more thing about a lot of times people in our population with felony backgrounds, on top of just being a little bit confused if we're eligible, when we ask, sometimes we're told no, flat out no. And sometimes that might be an intimidation tactic to prevent us from engaging in our civil rights. And what is your recommendations for that?
Yeah. Maybe seek a second opinion if that's what people are told, or, maybe ask why, and get those specifics. There's a list of reasons, like Ashley mentioned, of why they may not be eligible. So if that's what they're told, why, I will say that's also something that we as advocates are working to address in different ways. I think one, just public education sessions like this are really beneficial so that even people who are in those institutions know the rules. But then also when you look at things like the Texas legislature and, introducing bills that require people to be notified when they are off paper so that that is final and certain and not something we have to worry about. That's another angle, that we're trying to improve all of this stuff on. So again, just really encourage people to kind of dig deeper into their own situations and figure things out that way. But also to be careful because there are certain criminal penalties that can exist if people vote when they're not eligible.
Thank you, Taylor. I'd like to switch it up a little and talk to Mandy. Mandy is formally incarcerated. Her sentence has been completely exhausted, and she has gone through the process of registering to vote and actually voting. And Mandy, we would love for you to share your experience and any barriers you might have faced and advice for people in your situation that are now eligible to vote on how to get started with that.
Thank you, Marcy. Yeah, and I think a lot of it is miscommunication, because when you are brought up, you think that once you're a felon, you can't vote. So like educational moments like this, where a lot of people just don't know better, that was kind of where I was at, is I didn't even know when I could vote. And then when I went through the process of getting off parole, I got off in September. September 18th was when I actually charged all the way off in 2020. And so I could vote in 2020. But I was scared, and I was scared because I didn't know how they were going to know that I was done. So something that you can do, or that I did, is that you get a paper from parole once you charge all the way off, but sometimes it'll take weeks to get it. Well, I just went to the office to get it because I wanted to feel safe, to know that I have the paper that I was totally done with parole and had discharged my sentence. But there was a couple of barriers that I had, only because, again, the information wasn't given to me correctly. Like, I now knew I could vote, but I didn't know, like, there's certain places to vote. Like when you're in a certain county, like there's certain places you're supposed to vote. There's certain places where you get registered. And like, even if you use this address, you have to have the address that matches your ID if you take it. But then some places, you don't even need this little voter registration card. You just need your ID. So it was really interesting to me when I first voted. And I have voted a couple of times now, because they have, different types of elections. But the first time I voted, which was actually the first time I voted in my life, because I was 19 when my charge happened, and I didn't think I could vote. And so through my experience, I learned that a resource that isn't talked about enough is the public library. So the public library was the person that walked me through, because they held held where you could vote at the public library. And so when I went to make sure that I was doing everything right and I had questions, she walked me through it. There were people that were working the election that kind of talked me through it. And I was like, okay, because I didn't, even the simple thing about just putting your paper in there and going to answer these questions, like, you don't understand that in an election, you're not just saying, what president do you want? Yes or no. In the preliminaries, you're not just saying, you're actually voting for different people for different subjects that affect your city and then affect your state. And I don't think that that's talked about enough either when it comes to voting. It's not just your voice on the United States president, it's your voice inside of your town, inside of your community, and knowing those politics and knowing what's going on. That's where you have the most power. And it took me a while to learn that, because I didn't know. But that, in a nutshell, that was kind of my experience. I'm not sure if you want me to go in more detail or if you had any questions.
Mandy, that was a lot of really good information. And I love that you brought up the technical aspect. And I think that that's people that have been in prison for a number of years, we kind of lose touch with even putting something into a scan machine. And so do you have advice, like specific advice for someone who's exhausted their sentence this year and maybe they only got out of prison this year as well?
My advice would be, one, if you want to be 100% sure, just make sure that you have your charge off paper with you. Not that you have to take it with you, but just you have proof, if ever, because that's what I needed. And then have someone you trust go with you, because they can go with you through the whole. Actually, I think now you can register online. Well, I didn't know how to do that then. So I think now you can register online. There's a lot of easier, more accessible ways, but I did it in person. And if you go with someone you trust, they can walk you through it, and they can even walk you all the way to the point where y'all just go to 2 separate computers. And then when you go to 2 separate computers, there's a lady there walking around, and you can ask her, like, how do you do this? Because that's what I did. I was like, how do I do this? And like, what do I do? And she put it in, and she was like, I can't help you, but you just like, because it's a touch screen too, which if you've been incarcerated for a long period of time, that's new to you too.
Thank you so much for that. And I see in the chat a statement about registering online. And I'm wondering if, Ashley, could you talk to us about, can Texans register online, or how do they register?
Great question. Taylor, I saw you going off mute. Is that what you're going to talk to you about? Go for it.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, unfortunately, Texas is one of the about 11 states that does not allow online voter registration, which is definitely a bummer. But there are a couple of things, like if you move within Texas from one county to another, you can update your registration online on the DPS website. So there's that. Also, if you renew your driver's license online through the DPS website, there should be an option there to update your address while you're doing that. So there are a couple online methods, but if you're, a first-time voter, you can't just register online. I also wanted to speak real quick to Sylvia's comment in the chat. Yes, very large percentage of Texas public libraries in Texas are required to be voter registration agencies. So the staff there are required to provide voter registration forms and assist you with those if needed.
Thank you so much for that clarification, Taylor. We appreciate you. I'd like to go over to Brother Rob. Brother Rob, you are directly impacted by the system, and you are currently on parole. I would like for you to dive into how people in your situation and mine, because I am not eligible to vote yet until 2030, and how can we still engage in the process and be engaged in our communities in the civic engagement.
Thank you so much for that very important question. And I want to just extend my gratitude to the conveners of this dialogue, because I think it is, to Mandy's point, so relevant for many of us that have been impacted by the system. So let me just start and say, by way of getting to your question, I'm in this space because there was a time in my life when I was so disconnected from society, I didn't know up from down. Like I was disjointed from what it meant to be a member of the public, a citizen, right? And I was placed in a cage. I was placed in prison as a result of my conviction and punished. There was to make the story succinct, there came a time when I started reflecting on what it meant to be disconnected and questioning whether or not I wanted to remain so. I concluded that I did not want to remain apart from the society, that I did have a stake in this ideal called community. And so I began to inform myself about the kind of person I wanted to show up in the world as. I came home from prison, and I completed a 7-year term of parole. And after that period of time, I began to get invested in local politics. I registered to vote, and I participated in an election. Unfortunately for me, I also was struggling with some internal challenges like mental health diagnosis, untreated, undiagnosed, and substance use disorder. And so I found myself on a slippery slope back to reincarceration as a result of that. I lost my right to vote again. And this time it was different from the first time, because the first time I had no clue about what it meant to have my franchise. I had no real conceptualization of what it meant to be a citizen in this society. And I didn't understand my vote, what my vote was my voice. So this time around, it landed differently. It was offensive to me. I accepted that I needed to be accountable for my choices, but I was wrestling with, why did my vote have to be removed? And that's what led me to the study of history. And I learned that historically, the stripping of the vote from a person with a felony conviction was a part of the oppressive history of our society in dealing with African Americans. And as a result of that, I began to take this disenfranchisement offensively. And so I determined that it was important for me to not only educate myself about the history, but also educate my community about protecting themselves against the same fate happening to themselves. So to answer your question, my role and the role of people like myself, we can be catalysts for change. there's so many of my young peers that were like myself that I can relate to, who were walking through the world oblivious. They didn't understand the gravity of an opportunity to be a part of society. As Mandy already pointed out, I have a child in school right now. He goes to school right down the street from my home that I pay a mortgage for. If tomorrow the school board was going to decide on who was going to sit on that board, I couldn't weigh in on that. That's offensive to me because I have a child that I pay tax at my home for a school that my child goes to, but I wouldn't be able to make a decision about the fate of my child at that school. That's offensive. So what I'm doing is I'm lifting up out of my story those elements of understanding now that I possess as a result of my experience, my lived experience, and my goal is to the degree that I can through knowledge and empowering others, aid people not to fall into the trap that I've fallen into, which is allow myself, unfortunately, to be denied my rights in the society because of my felony conviction. Secondly, I would say in conclusion, we have to become informed. So even though I can't vote, I'm informed. I know what's happening on the local level at the commissioner's court. I know what's happening at city council. I'm reading articles. I'm sharing articles. I'm not just on social media taking my selfies. I do that. I enjoy a good selfie. I enjoy looking good, but I'm also making sure that in the midst of doing this, I'm educating the people that are watching me, because today there are people that are watching me, and these are people that I can have positive influence over. And on top of that, my peers, the folks that I'm in proximity to that are formerly incarcerated, I'm picking up the phone and I'm calling them and I'm asking them, are you off parole, brother? Oh, yeah, I'm off parole. Did you know that in the state of Texas? And I repeat everything that Ms. Harris indicated from the ACLU, because I'm in conversation with people like Ms. Harris, and I'm making sure that I'm disseminating that information throughout my networks. I believe that this is what a catalyst is supposed to be doing, and that's what I consider myself today. And even though I can't vote, they can't take my voice. My voice is my power today. My story is my power today. And I'm on the sidelines, but only to the extent that I'm the coach. So I'm still getting the joy out of watching the team play. I just can't get in the game and play myself.
Thank you, Brother Rob, and thank you for your work and contribution to our community in regards to this topic and so many others. We appreciate you so much. I'd like to ask Steve about, so Steve, you're also system impacted, and it's been a few years, and you've been home and you've been working in the criminal justice field, reform field, I should say, for quite a while. But I'd like for you to talk about, it's easy for me to say when I'm talking to my peers, since you're off paper, you can vote. And it occurs to me that there are people that are on paper, on probation, with misdemeanors. And so can you kind of dive into the difference between misdemeanor probation and felony probation and their rights in regards to that?
First, I'd like to let the audience know that a while actually refers to decades. She's just being polite. No, seriously, I think that's a good question that you have, and I think Ashley really provided some real rich information about that eligibility process and that visual presentation she gave. And I'd like to take the opportunity to say that in that regards that, on the dot, if you're currently on probation with a felony, you cannot vote. If you have deferred adjudication, you can, and if you're on misdemeanor, you can. On the dot, I think one of the biggest questions that or discussions that we kind of miss out on when we have these open forums is really about why vote. The truth is I've been doing this for a while, aka decades. But it's been a while, and one of the things that I've learned is getting people to register to vote. Yeah, that's awesome, but if there's no power building behind it, you're not as effective as we would like to hope in terms of political power building for impacted communities. What do I mean by that? Registering someone to vote. You're an activist, you have your belief, you're out there, you're progressive, you're conservative, whatever it may be, you're registering someone to vote that's just as impacted and they're registered. What's next? The truth is are they going to vote your way? They may or may not. The truth is they're going to have to make a decision. They're going to have to either vote red or blue. That's what America has. Even if they're at the city level and the municipality you live in doesn't have partisan elections like San Antonio, which is nonpartisan, you might have to go ahead and decide who's the meaner guy and who isn't. But the overall reality is, what does it equate to? If we're going to organize our people, we have to organize them to be politically powerful. That does not mean being able to register to vote and get them to the voting polls. That's an expression of our views and values to some particular point of reference of how we feel for that election for it to turn out. But political power is being able to influence the after effect of that one day that we exercise that vote that we spent 364 days of a year trying to get people to get out to. And that's, a national election. And that's really an exaggerated sentence in a sense, as, it was mentioned earlier, there are various other different elections going on throughout the city. But so getting out to vote and registering to vote, right? That's been going on for a while now. Has anything changed? Have things gotten better? Absolutely not. They've gotten worse. They keep getting worse in the sense of how we invest in our communities, how we address crime, and how we address our social issues, and how we just address each other in general is becoming a worse political nightmare. Our vote can't be just about registering and voting. Let me give you an example of the kind of power we need to have. A judge who gets elected in a primary in Bexar County, they get elected with like about 14,000 votes. And let me tell you something, make it very clear since this is recorded. We aren't playing games. We outnumber you and we will out-organize you. We can and we will be able to mobilize twice that amount of voters in any primary to kick out any member of the judiciary who doesn't carry out the promises of working towards a more just and equitable system and not carrying on the same old game. That's what we need. We know the judges, we know elected officials can be more open and more able to meet the needs of society. It's not about being liberal or being conservative. It's about just simply addressing those basic universal human rights, those needs that each and every individual, right, those inalienable rights that we so much proclaim as being holy to thou, those rights, right, is the only thing that we're asking for. But we get trapped in, the seesaw game of politics, and only unified political power that is able to threaten elected office is going to get us what we want. Otherwise, we're going to be playing the same old game. So the game is to build political power so that you can be able to influence the after effect of those elections. That is not anything that is being done right now in America. We only work towards that election day, and then we all go away pissed off, sending off letters why you didn't do this, and because we don't do follow-up. There's no movement building. The other thing that registering to formerly incarcerated people to vote requires is that formerly incarcerated people that are out there, and this isn't for everybody. So I want organizers and people who work in the field of criminal justice reform to know I'm not trying to scare you off. This message is for those who are listening, that this is what's for them. We need to become the community patriarchs. We need to replace the current community patriarch, and we need to become the community patriarchs. We need to be the go-to people that elected officials go to. And the only way we can do that is if we can back that up with the power of numbers, so that we can say, I have 3,000 formerly incarcerated registered voters that can back me up. And this is what we need for our community. Because if we don't, we're going to find someone who will give to our community, and that person's going to be more likely to be able to be effectively involved in their community. Politics has gotten sleepy and lazy. We have gotten to wake it up, and we've got to wake it up with that kind of, I guess you would call it a radical approach to power building. But just getting out to register to vote, if you're just going out to register to vote, and then you voted, and that's all you did, I want to thank you, because you need to do that. But why did you really vote? You voted to hire someone. Now it's your job to manage them. So join organizations like All of Us in Texas. Contact groups like the Texas Civil Rights Project. Contact groups like the Texas ACLU. They're also engaged. You got the Texas After Violence and the grassroots leadership, and you have lioness programs. That's what you need to do, because then you know, okay, we voted you in to do that. Now we're going to show up with the same number of voters that voted you in at your office, wherever it is across the state, to start asking you to do what it is you told us you were going to do to get our vote. And that's political power. And we've got to quit going through that one-day show-up shit, because that's not working. Start becoming community patriots, start taking charge of your communities, and start exerting political power where it needs to be exerted. I'm done. Let me get off my soapbox.
That we have got a lesson from decades worth of experience, and we are grateful and better off for it, sir. So we surely appreciate that. And I might come back to you about how to mobilize our community in that way, and your recommendations for that. I want to open it up for Tisa. Tisa, I want to talk to or ask you about, how do we know who to vote for? How do we know who is for what we stand for? So could we start on that?
You know, I think Steve took the mic away from me and went on the best soapbox, in my frank opinion. I think one of the things that he said, if you don't mind me piggybacking off of you, is to get involved with advocacy groups, but there are also online resources as well. So let's go back a little bit on that question. It's kind of loaded, because when we talk about what's important to the community, first, there needs to be an agenda of some sort. So of course, you know, we could talk about second chances and clean slate, using clean slate as an example, but you need to have an opportunity to talk to your community, the lived experience community and formerly incarcerated, to know exactly what's important to everyone, and then look to see who backs or who supports what you're talking about. And how do you find that out? Well, the first thing is to figure out who your elected officials are. You can go to vote.org, put in your zip code. You can go to the Texas Secretary of State website, put in your address, put in your zip code, and understand who are your representatives. Now, after that, you need to understand that it's up to you as the voter to go to that individual's website. Those that are running for a particular office, go to their website, and you can email their staff and ask them specific questions about specific bills or initiatives that you believe would be important to you and your journey. And not only you, because it's value and there's power in numbers. One thing that I share with the Lioness Group is that I am the niece of formerly incarcerated individuals. My uncle was imprisoned for the majority of my life. And one of the things that's been really important to me is to unmask and uncover what it means to get yourself back on track. And the point of the matter is that politics has a great deal to do with getting back on track once released and back into trying to reintegrate into society. And that's what Clean Slate is essentially all about, is how do we ensure once your debt is paid, you know, to society, or however you want to think about it, how can we ensure that we are in housing, how to ensure employment, and not making it more difficult on this side than it was on the inside? Because the goal is, for me anyway, it should be restoration. And I think we can all agree to that. So there are steps that we have to take. Now, I'm gonna be real honest with y'all. Today, I'm not gonna go into what party or what candidate that I think is best. That's the work that you gotta do. But we can talk about is how do you find out for yourself? And there's different types of issues. We talked about, Steve talked about the judges, right? So it's important for you to go ahead and go on those websites and figure out who those judges are. And if you can't vote, don't worry about it. Do you have a family member that can vote? I can vote. The advocates can vote. So you find somebody that can vote and you educate them on why you think a particular candidate would be fantastic for them to vote for because of something that could directly affect you and the community. So that's one thing I want to talk about, the judges for sure. Then also county sheriffs. Look into those races. Very important. Don't forget about our brothers and sisters on the inside. So we need to ensure that we're paying attention to those particular races and looking not just at the D and the R. Go click on it, read about them, see what their records are, and email and ask them whether they think specifically about the issues of second chance, or if it's about incarceration itself, something that you might have dealt with inside. Ask them. Even if you don't have the right to vote, right now, you can still ask. You're still a constituent, regardless of whether you can vote. Don't forget that. You still have a voice and you still are powerful because you'll know somebody that can vote for you with you. Council members, of course, second chance hiring. You want to look into see if your municipality offers second chance hiring. You can specifically ask your mayor, your council member, are they supportive of city employees being from the second chance and community? So I just want you to know that there is hope on the other side. So into Clean Slate, do you want me to get into that, Marcy, or you want me? Okay. So into Clean Slate even more, let's talk about that. So Clean Slate is a package of bills that could provide some record sealing relief automatically and expand eligibility, making record clearing more accessible to all Texans. This is an initiative that is actually nationwide. I had the absolute pleasure of meeting Marcy and Jennifer and Donise in the work in Philadelphia, because we are a part of a broader coalition of supporters who believe that there should be policy in Texas law to ensure the sealing of a person's criminal arrest record, okay? And it's under circumstances through a process called non-disclosure. Now, all of us have different opinions about how this could be executed. So this is the homework assignment. I'm not even pushing for that. What I want you all to do is to look up what Clean Slate means. So you can look up Clean Slate Texas Coalition. You can go on the Lioness website. You can talk to these sisters directly and see what their points of views on the type of bills that should be filed. And then what we're going to do is go about how do we advocate to ensure that lawmakers are aware of the benefits of ensuring that backgrounds are sealed. And it also, in my opinion, and I'm sure yours as well, I'm amongst friends, so now I'm like, I can be more frank about this, is that automated to me is the way to go. I think it should be automatically sealed, some records, so we can expand that eligibility and people can get back to work and get housing. Everyone has a right to a second chance, in my frank opinion. So what we also are looking to do is eliminating fees and forms associated with this process. And so we're getting ready to head into the Texas legislative session in January. And of course, you want to make sure you're registered to vote now. There's a lot going on. This is like the Super Bowl of the legislator, and so of government. So we're going into the national elections, some local, some county elections, and then We've got, maybe some Senate races and the like. And so then we've got our state legislature that's going into session. And that's when we all have to show up and ensure that we're letting our elected officials know what our point of views are based upon what Steve said. So I hope I covered it broadly enough to where I'm not taking a stance, but want to encourage you that the term is clean slate, record, or automation, and expanding eligibility.
And I think that's an important thing to bring up, clean slate, as sort of a key discussion point when it comes to voter registration and voter turnout, and in the sense that the conservative organization, Texas Public Policy Foundation, if you look at their data on their website, they'll tell you that 8 out of 10 Texans have criminal histories. So that's a huge population. The other thing is that the voter data that we've done such extensive research on, we have done, I think we're going on 15 years of research data on formerly incarcerated populations. We can tell you that it's split between both parties, to conservative, progressive, whatever you want to call it, right? So it's really important, and the reason being is because if we're going to get a bill passed, there are plenty of people who are conservatives who are impacted by the system, who are consistent voters, who need to start reaching out to conservative legislators to say, hey, let's quit playing this game between the D's and the R's and start talking about the people and humans, and that includes me, a voter in your conservative district, who lives in that $300,000, $400,000 house, who has a family member who's impacted, or myself impacted, because that's a reality of the characteristic of the voter makeup. So you got to understand what I'm telling you is that more than half of the voting population is just as impacted when you can do data comparison. So how do we educate voters to think about that in a different way and realize, okay, what can I do now as a voter to connect with local organizations, or what can I do now as a voter to make sure that I go to, for those voters that are hearing this, that's a conservative who might say, you know what, I'm justice impacted myself, so I need to go see my justice, my conservative legislator, to tell him about those needs in my community as well, because that's important. So many times they turn this game into this Democrats or Republicans, and it shouldn't be, because this is not a partisan issue. This is a bipartisan human issue. And so voters make up, of both sides of the spectrum, both make up a large majority of the people with records population also. So there's a power within the voting base that's already there that just needs to be completely re-strategized and mobilized, which is what organizations like us are working on. So if you want clean slate done, we're going to have to go visit conservative legislators too. The good news is this. The good news is this, that it's terrible news also, that I have to tell you that the good news, it's terrible news that I have to tell you that the good news is they have made sure that almost everybody all across Texas and America is just as impacted, no matter how red or blue that county is. They are all just as impacted. So we just need to figure out how we make those connections and tear down that imaginary wall that's been created to keep people like us from connecting the dots and saying, wait a minute, maybe we can do something about this. So that's
I'll jump in there, Steve. I think that there is an opportunity right now. I think there is an opportunity, and I hope y'all can hear me now, because someone just texted me and said I was going in and out. Thank you. I think there's an opportunity now, and that goes back to what you were saying earlier, which is to do that research and understand who your representative is, who they are. That's an easy fix. That's an easy way to go online or ask a friend to help you with your zip code. and reaching out directly to don't worry about the D and the R stuff. You're right. It's a nonpartisan issue. Just let them know that you are a voter and this is something that's important to you. And that you're a constituent. That's important enough. You don't have to talk about that stuff. You're absolutely right. And secondly, and again, getting within organizations like yours and Lioness and other advocacy groups, getting involved, they do the work for you. And they will tell you, hey, listen, this is what's important to us. These are the legislators that we need to be knocking on doors. Do you live there? And so getting involved is the first step. So if you are out there, you are not involved in one of these amazing groups, I highly recommend that you sign up and you get involved, regardless of whether, of your voter eligibility. That makes no difference, because we need your voice. We need your testimonies. When it comes to Austin, we need your testimonies. Even on the national level, there is a federal clean slate bill that they're trying to do, and we, fingers crossed, to make a bipartisan effort for record sealing and the like. So there's opportunity to make your voice heard for sure. And you can go to Clean Slate Texas, or you can go to cleanslate.org, and all of this will pop up, y'all. All of it will come up automatically. And you can sign up so you can get updates. And again, don't ever overlook local impact. I love the grassroots organizations that are around the corner, because they are the ones that care about you the most and understand what you're going through. So I would say that you can do that right today, right now. Get involved, reach out to those particular individuals. And just like you would if you saw something going, when we protest, let me put it this way. When we're protesting issues, we have a tendency to reach out when things are going wrong. So let's be proactive and say, listen, this is a way we can fix the system. This is a way of reform. And that's what my organization is about. How can we come together and fix this problem? And it goes back to your voice talking to your elected official, and then the rest of us backing it up as much as we can in Austin in January. And of course, again, in November as well. So you've got different levels, different branches of government. That's important to understand too. I'm not going to give a civics lesson here, but all branches of government are definitely important.
Go ahead, Steve. Did you have your hand up?
No, Mandy, did you have your hand up? No, but I did have a question for Mandy, Marcy, if you didn't mind. But
please,
it's basically along what you told me, what you had earlier mentioned. How do we mobilize our communities? First, I'd like to say that there's so much that we could say about how we mobilize our communities. So many of us here have so many unique and innovative ideas, and they're really just so many different ways. But I'd like to talk to you about a real important characteristic of community mobilizing when it comes to justice impacted families. And this is because I think it's something that is brief, but yet really important that and that is this. I couldn't deny it even if I tried to. I'm gonna tell you right now, women are a very important key to the mobilization of justice impacted communities. Women in my years of experience have taught me can be very powerful leaders and motivators. They tend to access networks quicker. I'm not saying us men are no good and we need to go home, sit on the couch, get fat, drinking a beer. No, I'm saying that when you're out there, women are going to be really go-getters, and if you can identify that one woman in the family that is really has a lot of that familiar connections where everybody goes to them for something as guidance, that's a real good person to try and bring in as an extended leader, a part of your network. Men are just as effective, good. We are just good leaders, and we can be good speakers and all that. I'm just saying that in a broader sense, it's been my experience that women really play an important, critical role in the organizing of justice impacted families. I've learned from my experience This is just from my experience, my opinion, you know, and you can, I'm gonna ask for some input, like Mandy, maybe you can answer some of this, but it's my experience because women, although they are becoming, you know, an increasing population of incarceration, primarily they are the primary raisers of the family, so they have so many other financial and other different stressors and anxieties that they're facing, raising the kids, and then you know the husband is incarcerated, or they may also have been incarcerated, just got out. How do I get the kids back? So they tend to have, you know, politically or awaken in a way that sometimes men aren't immediately awakened to. So it's just my experience, you know. I want to acknowledge that the important role that moms and grandmothers and aunts and tias and the cousins and that they all play when mobilizing justice impacted families, because women just have this way of getting the other person to understand why it's so important, and it's done through that lived experience. It's a really unique experience for you to see it unfold. It's really powerful. But Mandy, is there any sense to what I'm talking about? Do you, as someone coming out incarcerated, you know, being a woman, it's you know, I mean, I see that. Do you see that, you know, within yourself also, or other women when you're organizing out there?
I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I'm so glad that's been your experience, but women in general are an oppressed population. And as a Latina, we very much do succumb to the patriarchy in my generation, like generationally. So that is not my experience. I am very much a strong individual in my family. So I'm like the black sheep. And I would say that the way that women have we've been able to organize together is because we went to prison together and we came home and we wanted to make a difference and we connected and we wanted our voices. But it took us going through that together. And sometimes our family still doesn't understand. Like I have conservative family members that we had to have a discussion, but I can leave everyone where they're at and I can believe what I believe and support what I support. And that's just kind of how it stands. That is not my experience, but I could be wrong. Maybe Marcy has a different experience with her women in her family.
I see. Yeah, you know, so it's about like giving women an opportunity to be leaders and take leadership position. Now, you know, I think one of my experiences was seeing women excel is because I always try and open up space and encourage them to get involved and take the lead, and so I guess, you know, there's a variance on how that's approached, and I do understand what you're saying, but either way, I'm still hearing that you know, you as a group are an effective core group of women, and that's really, you know, I think what I just wanted to stress was that, you know, when you dealing with families in the community, you know, and nothing's a win-win situation with everybody. What I'm saying is you're going to get a greater percentage of success eventually as you meet more and more women who are politically awakened and start recruiting in their communities. And that's how you build your community networks. And you don't just have conversations, you know. If you have you know, you throw a block party, no alcohol, just, you know, punch and sodas and some food and some conversation about, you know, the needs of the community that eventually lead to voting, as opposed to just, you know, going door to door or walking, you know, how do you build those connections? Because voting has to be personal in your community if it's going to be voting to make a difference, as opposed to just showing up in the polls and doing your civic duty. There's a
Yes, sir.
difference.
Thank you so much, Steve. And you brought up so many facts, key facts, and I love that, like, you brought up a community event that Grassroots does, a night for safety and just. They do a lot of those community building events, and then you also in this conversation came up a way that formerly incarcerated people can get involved in civic engagement by offering testimony at legislation. You and Tisa both brought that up, and that is something that Brother Rob and Mandy, myself, Jennifer have all participated in. Brother Rob, I see your hand up.
Yes, I'm going to have to make this one of my last comments for the evening, but I've appreciated the robust conversation. And I've also written down several notes, including the Clean Slate initiative that I've read about when I was incarcerated, but I have not yet had the fortune of participating in any of its conversations since I've been released. But I'll just say this, a couple of things come to my mind. One, I really like the idea of the clean slate because I remember so many times I've tried to participate in a couple of events that were saying that they were going to be expungement clinics and get there and they're only dealing with misdemeanors, which in no way helped me because I had felony convictions. And this idea of a bigger way of removing our past from a view and definitely removing it from being a hindrance to us seems like an attractive policy issue for us to sink our teeth in. I just, again, haven't had the good fortune of being in those spaces to participate intentionally. So thank you for lifting that up tonight, Tessa.
Absolutely, Brother Rob. So glad to hear that. And so you would be federal, right? So I put that in the chat.
Federal and state, and also
Federal and state. You want?
Yeah.
Okay, they're both in there. I put that in there for you.
Okay. And then so the last thing I'll just simply say is, as I'm listening to this conversation, I want to go back to talking about Robert as a child, as a young man, because that's the person that was incarcerated. And that, I think, to a great extent, that person that I represented at that time is an example of the people that we're trying to engage when they come home. That Robert was so disconnected from society. And so, like, just even coming into the organizer space, when I first came into the organizer space, Tessa said she wasn't going to, I hope I'm not pronouncing your name wrong. Tisa, excuse me, Tisa. I see the pronunciation there. I remember coming into the organizer space, and there were a lot of assumptions that were made about what level of understanding I had about society. There was a lot I didn't understand. Yeah, I learned the fundamentals of the three branches of government, but I knew nothing about a commissioner's court. I knew nothing about city council. And so I think we've got to figure out a way to build more spaces for education. Perhaps we need to go back to the freedom schools of the 60s and the 70s, like the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee created. And we have to start engaging our people from the ground up, not making assumptions, or perhaps if we're going to make an assumption that they don't know, not from a place of judgment or criticism, but from a place of compassion and love, because we want you to get to a place where you can invest your fuller, more whole and true self in these conversations. The last thing I'll say is this. I'm an organizer, and I'm proud of that fact today, and I'm learning more and more of what that role entails of me. But what I didn't understand was how powerful our stories were. I didn't understand that even if you don't understand the elements of your story and how that can be interpreted by those who have decision-making power, my goal is to just say that thing to my people again and again and again. Your story matters. Like, I can talk to one person in my experience, people in my network, and they've been contacted by foster care system. They've had contact with CPS. They've had contact with juvenile institutions. They've had contact with police departments. They've had contact with welfare officers. So one person is carrying in their story, in their body, contact with countless systems that have oppressed and negatively affected our population. I think, at the end of the day, if we can get those people in the door and get them to start trusting us and opening up, we can learn a lot from them, and we can learn a lot of how to move our community from one place to another. So I could go on, but I don't want to belabor the time. I just want to say I'm grateful for you all creating this container for us to put our thoughts into. My prayer, and I'll say this in closing, I was sitting here looking at myself on the camera, not that I'm vain, but I was just looking at myself on the camera because I could see my face looking back at me. And I thought to myself, years from now, people are going to watch this video. People are going to listen to this conversation, and people are going to walk away knowing that we weighed in on this topic. I'd rather be in this moment right here now doing this than sitting on the sidelines complaining about what's wrong and what can't change, because I believe that that is not true. I believe that we can change things, but we can't change it alone. We've got to band together and use our strength. And so I'm just, again, grateful for being here and lending my voice to this cause, because I think it's a noble cause. And I'm just thankful that I'm alive to be able to weigh in on it, because it could be otherwise.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, Brother Rob. I appreciate you so much. I want to open it up to the audience for questions. If you have a question, please, you feel free to put it in the chat or raise your hand. And I know Jennifer, I believe she has a question for Taylor and Ashley. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Yes, well, and first let me say what a great conversation tonight, and I think this conversation is the example of how all of this connects together, right? Everyone here just wove beautiful threads of how voting, how participating in the process connects to the changes that we want to see, right? Whether it's clean slate, whether it's the making sure that we get temperature control inside TDCJ and Texas prisons, like all the things that we want to accomplish, we have to have the right people in those spaces and places to do that, right? So the voter education piece, the political education piece, I love that was brought up this evening. So I appreciate that, and I'm thinking that we'll have more conversations about just how you can do that political education piece with our community. But my question, Ashley and Taylor, I believe there is a deadline coming up. I think it's October 7th. Is it too late for folks to register to vote? Also, and I heard on the news that the voter rolls were I heard them say scrubbed, cleaned off, or they did something. I went and checked to make sure I was still registered. People were taking off the registration. So can we still register, and how do we check to see if we weren't taken off?
I can start. Yeah, so it is definitely not too late to register. You have until October 7th, the end of the day. If you get to like your DPS or elections office by 5 p.m. whenever they close, or if you find a volunteer deputy registrar, which is regular people like us, who can, get certified by your county to register people, they can register you until 11:59 p.m. on October 7th, as soon as I get that form in the next day. And I can also grab the link to be able to check if you're registered, because that's another great point. I vote in every single election, but I also checked my status just to make sure. The thing with, I feel like there's two sides to that point about the voter registration purges or the list scrubbing. Is one, we do want to make sure everyone is double checking, because there are ways that they can put people on the suspense list, or possibly cancel registration if it's been a long time since you voted. But the other side of that is that it was kind of just maintenance, or regular list maintenance. And Ashley, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not like Abbott single-handedly wiped out tons of voters off their rolls. Like, no, it was pretty regular stuff. So if people, have moved, if they have a reason to think that they are no longer at that address that they're registered in, those people may have been put on the suspense list. So most likely you're good to go. But again, really recommend that everyone just double check their status. And then one quick note, since I mentioned it, the suspense list is basically where they put people if they think that their current voter registration address is not correct. But if you're on suspense, you can still vote. So again, we recommend that people do update their status, their registration. But if you go to the polls on election day and you're on suspense, you can still vote. They're just going to update your address then and there. And then you will be all set. But I'll go ahead and pass it to Ashley if I missed anything or misstated anything.
That all sounds right to me. Just reiterating that folks can check their registration online through their county elections websites, or votetexas.gov is a good option to kind of follow the links to check your registration. And you want to do that before October 7th. So you can register if you're eligible and need it, or if you need to update your registration, you need to re-register every time you move to a different county or even a different address in Texas. So if you've moved since the last time you registered, you will want to update that and make sure your address is updated.
Thank you. Great question, Jennifer. Thank you, Taylor and Ashley. Mandy, you have a question?
I do, and it's not really mine, but it's been in the chat, and I have been like, somebody answer this. So, Sylvia, I believe is her name. She asked, some homeless individuals have completed sentences clean on paper. How does this pocket of hard to reach voters with no home address vote, I assume? That's the question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, just to reiterate, for folks that have prior criminal convictions, you'll want to run through those steps we talked about earlier to make sure that you're eligible, and for other reasons like citizenship as well. But for folks that are eligible, they can register even if they are homeless. So when filling out a voter registration form, you just need to fill out the place where you consider home, where you're residing. And that doesn't necessarily need to be a residential, like an apartment or a home. It can be something like a shelter. It can also be kind of like a physical landmark of where you reside, if that's like a certain street corner or something like that, like street address. Or general location. So it just needs to be your residence, and that's where either you live or you intend to reside. And kind of a related question, I think, is for folks in jail. A lot of people in jail are eligible to vote because, again, like we discussed, they don't have final felony convictions, so they might be detained pre-trial or for misdemeanors. Those folks can register. They register not with the jail's address, but with the address outside of the jail that they consider their residence. And then those folks are eligible, if you're in jail, to vote by mail, actually. And so that's kind of a multi-step process where you need to mail in an application, get your ballot, and then mail in your ballot. So both of those are situations where even though folks are displaced, they can still vote.
Thank you so much, Mandy, for bringing that question that was in the chat, and Ashley. Steve, did you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question for Ashley and Taylor. If someone gets a form 2144 that basically asks them to prove that they're eligible to vote, and what would you suggest someone do if they're off paper? Should they be even be getting that letter? And if they do receive the letter, does that mean that they're not able to vote until they fill it out? What would you suggest that they do for that?
Steve, I didn't hear the first part of what you said. I get from the county a question about their eligibility.
No, the Secretary of State, the county registrar, or whoever's in charge of your elections, gets a list from DPS every week. If someone who just registered to vote, should they expect that notice to come to them? It's called Form 2144. It's a response to notice of examination. Should they expect that, or is that just going to be for people who are on the convicted list?
We don't expect, it's not to my understanding that people should expect that form. If folks get a form like that that's unexpected, they can, or for a number of different questions, they can reach out to the election protection hotline at 1-866-OUR-VOTE. And actually, if things like that or just other things with polling issues come up, or questions about eligibility, can get more specific information. And Taylor just dropped that number in the chat. And Taylor, I don't know if you have any other specific information you want to respond to that.
No, not really. Well, I would agree that people shouldn't expect that. If they do, the form that I believe you're referring to requires people to provide proof within 30 days that they are eligible, and if not, their voter registration will be canceled, not just on suspense. So I would say to provide that information, and if you're able, and then if you think you are receiving that wrongly or just have any additional questions, yes, contact the Election Protection Hotline, and we have lots of amazing attorneys like Ashley who can help answer those questions and get those things resolved.
Thank you.
Great question, Steve. Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions for our experts today? Okay, I want to thank each and every one of you for your insight and for joining us. This has been very educational, and I appreciate you all and all of the organizations that you represent that have come together to get this information out there. And we will be streaming this also. So if you're on the call and you notice that someone you think needs this information didn't see it, make sure and check back because we will have it online for you to get. And with that, we'll call it an evening. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Bye, Marcy. I can't wait to see the edited version.
Yeah, I'm going to edit myself. No, I'm not going to edit it. Thank y'all.
Bye, everybody.
Bye now.
Thanks. Bye, y'all.